on the rivers and the desert. So what were the geographic features we had on our map? What was the one that a lot of you guys settled by? Yeah. The mountains. So we'll start with the mountains. So that's our first topic on our sheets. Okay? And so in terms of our mountains, there are some benefits of being near them or having them in the area. Okay? And some of you mentioned those when you described why you settled your town there. And as we look back at our map, several of you settled in this region by the mountains, which is not a bad decision. Okay? So what were some of the reasons? We had some good ones here in the middle.
Resources.
A lot of resources. And now we're talking very early on in the human development, okay? So they don't have mining and that kind of stuff going on, which we would have today. But what are some of the resources that would be available to you if you lived near the mountain?
Trees.
Okay, we do have typically trees for building. Good. What else?
Water.
Oftentimes we do have water, fresh water coming out of the natural springs. And in cases of really high mountains, we have snow that melts. Fresh water comes off of that. Okay. What else? Some of you mentioned it. Okay, that's going to be our next big item. We'll come to that. I'll put it on here, but that's going to be our next big item, is protection. But we're going to talk about that. Some of you mentioned it in terms of a food source. Hunting. Yeah, typically we do have a fair amount of animals that are in the mountain areas, and the hunting is a good spot.
The fishing.
And the fishing, we're going to get to that next. Okay, so this whole idea of protection, how are the mountains protecting us? How are the mountains protecting us?
Maybe your village gets attacked by some large amount of animals. Those livers in the mountains, and maybe they can't follow you.
Yeah, or let's say you live in this town right here, and this is my town out here, and I want to attack you. Is that going to be easy for me to do?
No.
Especially in these early development phases of human, we don't have tunnels, roads, airplanes, okay, atomic bombs. None of that stuff is around. So I got to get through the good old-fashioned way of walking, and those mountains are going to be pretty big barriers, and I might say, forget about it. I don't really care that much to come over and take you over. So the mountains are certainly going to serve as a protective barrier, okay? So big time. What's our next item that none of you even mentioned or went anywhere close to, and that was over on our left-hand side, our east side, which was our big desert. Because the desert does play a role, a very small role, but we're going to put that up here. And remember, we're talking about a desert, not dessert. Okay? What would be the advantages of settling in a region that has a large desert? And please don't tell me because you like to eat camel or cactus. That's not the answer.
Maybe the climate would be nicer.
Okay, you're going to have a fairly dry climate, yeah, which could be a negative in some cases. But you're not going to have huge, monsoons and things that we would have in India and places like that. What do you think?
To make glass.
No, eventually, yes. Eventually, yes. We will use sand, we'll make glass, but not in this early phase. They were thinking of it as more of something very similar to what the mountains offered. Protection, yes. It also is going to serve as a protective barrier. People are not going to want to cross miles and miles of hot sand to invade you for a couple of goats. It's not going to happen. Okay? So that brings us to our final resource. I went the wrong way. Our final resource on our map. What is it? Water. I just heard it. Water. And we have two types of water on our map. We have our freshwater rivers, okay? And we have this large body of salt water. Now, I told you before, artistic abilities, not very good. I attempted to draw this as close as I could. If we look at the map on the wall, this is actually what I was attempting to do. This was the Tigris River. And this was the Euphrates River. And this is technically, well, as close as I could, the bottom half, is the Persian Gulf. Okay? So if we look on our map here, Persian Gulf, and the two rivers. Mountains, deserts. Kind of see that? I tried, guys, I tried. Okay, so we have these two rivers, and we have the salt water. So let's put water on our list, and I'm going to be very specific because we're going to focus on one of the two types, and that is the rivers. Okay, and I'm even going to write underneath there are two that we want to know. Okay, our two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. Why are rivers important? Why?
For water.
Yes, I know there are water in the rivers. That is true. We do want the water, but what are we going to use the water for? What is something we want? Okay, drinking. Yes, we'll get to that. But there's one reason that is more important than any other reason. And it's the very reason that we have this whole development of civilizations along rivers.
Transportation.
That is one of the reasons, but that's not the reason. I'm going to put that up, but I want to get the big one, the most important one first.
Cooking.
No.
Fish.
No, that's not even for fishing.
Trading.
No, but that's one of them.
Water.
Yes, thank you. Fresh water for farming. Because we've talked about this whole idea that farming was the single most important development in human history. Guess what? If you don't have fresh water, you don't have a farm. Okay, and you don't have a farm, you don't have food, everybody dies, everything gets bad. Okay? Now, I want to list, and I want to underline this, because this is the single most important reason for that fresh water. And we get those in the rivers. Now, here's the thing, guys. We're going to study Mesopotamian, which is what we're starting. We're going to study Egypt. Guess what they're going to have? A big river. The Nile. Then we're going to study India. Guess what they have? A big river, the Indus River. Then we're going to study China. Guess what they have? Two big rivers. The Yangtze and the Huanghe, both large rivers, and they're going to start along. Okay? Every major civilization is going to start along some sort of freshwater source. Why? Because of the farming. Because that's their food source. The mountains, can you farm in the mountains? No. Okay? So you need that fresh water for farming. But there are also some other uses of that fresh water. Somebody said drinking. Fresh water is good for drinking. It is good for cleaning. Even though cleaning was not a high priority item at this time in history. Hygiene, not so good. Okay? What else did we say?
Cooking.
Cooking, yep, cooking in some cases. And somebody mentioned one of my two T's. I have two big T's that they used. Transportation was one of them. And trade. Good. Okay? And transportation and trade are so important. Because again, if I'm sitting in this city that I've already circled in red, and I want to trade with these guys down here, the mode of transportation is not very quick at this point in time in terms of packing up a cart, having a horse or an ox or something pull it. It's much quicker to just pull a boat down. Okay? And then we'll have eventually the development of a sailboat, which allows them to go upstream even quicker. Because a lot of times they had oars that they would paddle, or in some cases they would have animals along the side of the rivers pulling the boats back upstream. Kind of like a ferry system. Okay? So very, very important. Now, we also have this large body of water at the bottom of the Persian Gulf, or the salt water, and that is good for, and we didn't write it down, which is fishing. And I didn't mean to forget that. Okay? We do have a lot of fishing that goes on in the fresh water for obvious reasons. Okay?